Listening to music is pretty easy today, isn't all? All you need to do is pick up your headphones, turn on Spotify or YouTube Music, and that's pretty much all you need to start your musical marathon. But this wasn't always the case. In fact, at one point, listening to music meant that you had to walk all the way to a store to buy records. Music store owners pretty much had the monopoly over the music taste within the public, and of course, Tower Records was one of them. In this episode, we are going to find out what went wrong with Tower Records. But before we continue, make sure to give this a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to be the first to be notified of new behind the business videos that we post every week. Let's begin. Based in Sacramento, California, Tower Records was a music retail store that was all the rage in the mid-1900s all the way to the 2000s. The chain was founded by Russell Solomon, who named the store after his father's drugstore called Tower Theater. With its famous red-on-yellow signage and the endless music options you were exposed to once you entered Tower Records, the store quickly started gaining traction. Devoted music lovers would frequently visit the store multiple times a week to check out all the new music that was being released. Solomon wanted to set out on his own, and after a false start as a record wholesaler in 1961, he opened the first Tower Records on Watt Avenue, with its distinctive visible from space lettering designed by Mick Mickelson. Tower Books followed in 1976, also in Sacramento. But Solomon had bigger ambitions for his Sacramento-based brand. In 1968 and 1970, Tower had opened larger locations in San Francisco and Los Angeles, respectively. By this point, Tower Records had gone from only being a music store to becoming a vibrant community for music enthusiasts, not just in the USA, but all over the world. After its national success, the chain expanded internationally and opened its stores to the people in Japan in 1979. And then in 1983, the company opened a 4-story Temple of Music in one of the most rundown sections of New York City. Similar to the locations in San Francisco, LA, and throughout Japan, the New York City Tower was an enormous success. What was so great about all the Tower Records stores was the kind of vibe you were welcomed with as soon as you entered the world, with signs like "No Music, No Life" hanging everywhere. These stores became synonymous with the music buying experience in the 90s. At its peak, the company had nearly 200 stores in 15 countries, with sales exceeding $1 billion in 1999. At its iconic location in West Hollywood, customers would constantly run into music legends like Bruce Springsteen, Mick Jagger, and Ella Fitzgerald, buying themselves some records as well. This way, Tower Records helped people find their identity. The store employees didn't care if you bought anything. You could spend hours and hours in a store looking through records, talking to other customers, and having a good time. Tower Records wasn't just a music store, it was a social hub. If you still don't get it, let me put it this way. It was a bar, but instead of beer, they sold music. The walls were several feet high with vinyl records taking up all the space in the location. Imagine if iTunes was a physical store, that's what Tower Records looked and felt like. If there was a record that you couldn't find there, you probably wouldn't have much luck finding it anywhere else. Not just rock and pop, Tower also made sure that fans of all genres would find what they were interested in at the store. With probably 20 to 25% of the store being full of classical music, the customers were incredibly appreciative of the diverse kinds of music that Tower supported. The store would often hold events where musical legends like Pavarotti came 3 or 4 times to San Francisco to sign autographs for the fans. Beverly Sills was also a regular Tower visitor. And Itzhak Perlman would often come and educate the customers and employees with his encyclopedic knowledge of the music industry. After an artist had finished signing for a huge line of like 300, 400 people, the store gave out local wine for free, so that the artists, staff, and customers would have a chance to get to know each other better. How cool does that sound? No wonder Tower Records was the place to be back in the day. In fact, Elton John arrived at the store every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. and purchased a box load of records. It was his music center. However, it all came crashing down in 2006, when Tower Records became a victim of its own success and went completely bankrupt. Pushed underneath tons of debt, Tower Records failed to innovate and keep up with the sudden rise of digital music. This changed the landscape of the music industry, and of course affected the place Tower Music held in the hearts of music enthusiasts. But how did it all happen? Well, firstly, after seeing some 40 years of constant success, Tower Music became a little more ambitious than they should have. In the late 90s, the company had outlets around the US and began to open stores in Latin America, Europe, and Asia. But even company executives have now acknowledged that their irrational expansion wasn't directed by any strategic planning, and the company went into a spending frenzy, trying to conquer the global market. In 1998, Tower Records took on a $110 million loan to finance the global expansion, and that's where it all went wrong. The company lost $10 million in 2000 and $90 million in 2001. This financial burden of the loan weighed pretty heavily on the company's finances in the early 2000s. And as if that wasn't enough, this was also the time when people started switching over to CDs, giving the store a technology-driven hurdle on top of a financial one. At first, Tower switched to selling CDs at double the cost of their vinyls, and that worked just fine. But then stores like Walmart, Best Buy, and Target also started selling CDs for much cheaper, which decreased all profit margins, and Tower went into further bankruptcy. While Tower had a far greater collection of music, the kind of rates that stores like Best Buy were offering the customers were enough for them to take away Tower's business. With the advent of MP3 players and iPods along with the online music sharing app Napster, the relevance of Tower Records went down the drain even more. The final hit on the nail was when Steve Jobs introduced iTunes, where people could legally listen to music on their Apple devices for just 99 cents per song, which was obviously far cheaper and more convenient than listening to music on records or even on CDs. Tower's parent company declared bankruptcy in the United States in 2004. 2 years later, after liquidation sales had emptied its miles of CD racks, Tower shut down its 89 American stores, leaving a message outside the first store in Sacramento which said, "All things must pass." The only remaining Tower store is the flagship store in central Tokyo, which makes you feel like you've stepped into a different time with 9 floors of music, in-store performances, and out front a familiar sign in yellow and red with a familiar message, "No music, no life." Even with such an expansive chain of stores and a giant staff, Tower Records wasn't able to keep up with the digital revolution. What's more is that the Tower stores had also been hit by an industry-wide nosedive in record sales because of the piracy movement that changed the face of music in America. According to Solomon, he was pretty confident with the store's ability to adapt with changes in the industry. However, digitalization was something he failed to account for and passed up as a fad that would blow over in no time. But of course, that's where he was wrong. However, recently, Tower Records has been trying to make a comeback as an online music store, selling vintage vinyls, cassettes, and CDs. This has been a successful move, with tons of people returning back to Tower because of the sense of nostalgia that surrounds the store. Tower Records isn't only selling records again. The company's website features exclusive online performance as well as Tower Pulse magazine. It's hard to imagine a music store building communities and affecting the music industry like Tower Records did. But to this date, the legacy of this one-of-a-kind store lives on in the hearts of music enthusiasts all over the world, years after its doors have been shut. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to be the first to be notified of new behind-the-business videos we post every week. Be inspired, and we will see you in the next one. If you would like a more in-depth look at how some companies make their money, click the video on the left. Or if you would like to find out about other companies that were able to scale up their business empires into massive giants, click the video on the right.